The cold breeze swept through the marble courtyard of the Grand Elmont Hotel. Limousines pulled up, one after another, their polished doors swinging open to reveal stars dressed in black tuxedos and glittering gowns. Flashes from cameras lit the night sky like fireworks. Laughter, clinks of champagne glasses, and murmurs of praise filled the air. It was the annual Film Legends Gala, a place where only the elite gathered, and tonight, Keanu Reeves was the final guest to arrive. But Keanu didn't step out of a flashy limo. Instead, he arrived quietly, in the back of an ordinary hybrid car, dressed in a simple black suit. His hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, and he wore no watch, no ring, no air of importance. He held a small notebook in his hand, scribbled with ideas for a charity project he'd been working on that week. The driver, an older man with tired eyes, offered to open the door, but Keanu smiled and shook his head. "I got it, my friend," he said gently. He stepped out, calm and unbothered by the lack of applause or flashing bulbs. His presence, while quiet, had a certain weight to it, but not everyone noticed. At the valet booth, a young boy named Mason adjusted his red blazer nervously. It was his first week at the job. He had dreams of being a race car driver one day, but for now, he parked cars for tips. He was barely 19, full of fire, but also frustration. He had spent the day dealing with rude guests and arrogant celebrities who tossed their keys like he was invisible. So when Keanu walked toward him with that same calm, silent energy, Mason barely looked up. He saw the hybrid car behind him and frowned. In his eyes, this wasn't a star. This was probably someone who got lost. "Valets for guests only, man," Mason said, with a sharpness in his voice. Keanu blinked, a little surprised. "I am a guest," he said simply. Mason looked him up and down. "Yeah? You some producer or something?" Keanu shook his head. "No, just an actor." The boy laughed. "An actor? In what? YouTube skits?" He waved him off. "Look, I don't have time for jokes. Real guests are arriving." A few heads turned. The security guy nearby tilted his head, unsure whether to step in. Keanu didn't react. He looked down at the ground for a moment, then back at the boy with eyes full of something Mason didn't expect. Not anger, not pride, but empathy. "You've had a long day, haven't you?" Keanu said quietly. Mason stiffened. "Yeah, and it's not getting better with you standing here." Keanu nodded. "I get it, but listen. Sometimes the person you think is nobody turns out to be somebody. What's that supposed to mean?" Mason shot back, crossing his arms. Keanu stepped closer and handed over the keys. "It means we all wear masks sometimes. Tonight, mine just isn't made of diamonds." Before Mason could reply, the hotel manager rushed out, white-faced. "Mr. Reeves, I'm so sorry." She nearly tripped trying to greet him. "Please, come in. We have your seat ready. The audience has been waiting." Mason froze. His mouth dropped open. "Wait, Keanu Reeves?" Keanu gave a small smile. "That's me." The boy's face turned red. He looked down at the keys in his hand, then up at the man he had just insulted, the man his mother idolized, whose movies his little sister watched every night, the man who donated secretly to children's hospitals. And here he had just told him to leave. "I didn't know." "I'm sorry," Mason mumbled, his voice cracking. Keanu stepped closer and did something nobody expected. He placed a hand gently on the boy's shoulder and said, "You reminded me of someone I used to be. Angry, tired, unsure of who I was meant to become. But it gets better, Mason. Just don't let today's frustration blind you from tomorrow's kindness." Mason looked up, eyes wide. "You know my name?" Keanu tapped his chest. "I read your badge." The boy blinked back tears. "Thank you. I don't deserve it, but thank you." "We all mess up," Keanu whispered. "It's what we do after that matters." The moment felt frozen in time. Guests stopped talking. Cameras stopped flashing. The world had gone quiet. A small girl nearby tugged her mom's dress and pointed. "Mommy, why is that man hugging the valet?" The mother knelt and smiled. "Because sometimes the biggest stars have the softest hearts." Keanu gave Mason a warm smile and headed inside as the boy stood silently, holding the keys, tears forming in his eyes. But this was just the beginning, because what Mason didn't know was that his one bad moment was about to turn into the biggest lesson of his life and the most unexpected second chance. The next morning, the city woke up with headlines buzzing about the gala, but no one expected the story that took over the front pages. Not the red carpet looks, not the movie trailers, not the award speeches. Instead, it was a blurry photo. Someone had taken of Keanu Reeves standing beside a young valet boy, hand gently on his shoulder. The headline read, "Keanu Reeves comforts valet after being insulted. A lesson in grace." Mason saw it first thing when he opened his cracked phone. His chest tightened. His inbox had exploded. Some of his friends texted laughing emojis. Others asked, "Bro, is this really you?" But what made him stop breathing was the message from his mother. "Mason, I saw the article. I raised you better than this. You go and fix it. Today." He sat on the edge of his bed in his shared apartment, heart heavy, palms sweating. Guilt was a strange thing. It didn't shout. It whispered. It crept into his bones and made everything feel colder than it should be. He looked at the wall. A single poster of Keanu Reeves from The Matrix was still pinned there. Old, wrinkled, but still glowing with presence. Mason buried his face in his hands. He had insulted the one person his family admired most. Not just for the movies, but for who he was. His mother used to say, "That Keanu fellow, he's what a man should be." And he had told that man to leave. He showed up at work early, not to clock in, not to park cars, just to wait. He didn't know if Keanu would come back, but he hoped. Hours passed. Sun shifted. Guests came and went, but Keanu didn't appear. The hotel manager walked by and raised an eyebrow. "Mason, why are you here? You're not on shift." He stood nervous. "I was hoping to apologize in person. I messed up." The manager crossed her arms. He didn't complain, not even once, but everyone saw. "And honestly, you're lucky you still have a job." Mason nodded. "I know, I just want to make it right." Later, that afternoon, a black SUV pulled up, quiet and unannounced. Mason's heart skipped. The door opened slowly, but it wasn't Keanu. Instead, a woman stepped out, tall, elegant, wearing a long gray coat and holding a black envelope. "I'm looking for Mason," she said calmly. He raised his hand. "That's me." She walked straight toward him. "Mr. Reeves asked me to deliver this to you." Mason swallowed and took the envelope with shaking hands. "Thank you." She smiled gently. "You made an impression on him, not for what you said, but for what you felt afterward." And with that, she left. Mason opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a handwritten letter. His fingers trembled as he unfolded it. "Dear Mason, life is full of moments we wish we could take back. I've had many of them. What matters is what we choose to do next. You owned your mistake. That takes strength. I saw a fire in you. Not a bad one, just one that needs direction. Meet me tomorrow at 10 a.m. at Eastside Music Center. No suits, just you." Keanu stared at the letter for a long time. Music Center? He didn't know what to expect. But something inside told him this wasn't about punishment. This was about purpose. The next morning, Mason showed up to the Eastside Music Center wearing his oldest sneakers and a plain hoodie. The place was small, worn down, with faded murals of jazz legends on the outside walls. He walked in quietly. Inside was a group of children. maybe 10 or 12 years old, all sitting with old instruments in their laps. Violins missing strings, keyboards with broken keys, trumpets that looked like they hadn't been cleaned in years, and in the middle of it all stood Keanu Reeves. No cameras, no spotlight, just him. He was helping a little girl tune her guitar, smiling gently. Mason felt out of place, but Keanu looked up and waved him over like they'd known each other forever. "You came," Keanu said. Yeah," Mason said, rubbing the back of his neck. Keanu nodded to the kids. "These guys, they've got more talent than Hollywood. They just don't have the tools." Mason looked around. "What is this place?" "I fund it," quietly. "We help kids who've been through tough stuff. Music heals, sometimes faster than words." Mason's eyes softened. Keanu continued. "I thought maybe you could help me today." "Me?" Mason asked, surprised. "Yeah, these kids don't care about mistakes. They care if someone shows up for them." Mason walked over slowly. A little boy handed him a pair of bongo drums. "Play with me?" the boy asked, eyes bright. Mason sat beside him, unsure. "I've never played before." The boy grinned. "Me neither." And they laughed. Something shifted. In that tiny music center, surrounded by children who had seen more pain than most adults, Mason felt something break, free inside him, a part of him that had been tight with anger. Slowly began to loosen. Keanu watched from the side, arms crossed, smiling quietly, and for the first time in years, Mason forgot to check his phone, forgot to check the time. He just lived, and that was enough. As they packed up that evening, Mason walked beside Keanu outside. "Why me?" Mason finally asked. "You could have just ignored me, written me off." Keanu looked out at the setting sun. "Because someone didn't write me off once, and that changed everything." Mason nodded slowly. "I won't mess it up again." "You might," Keanu said gently. "We all do, but now you'll know how to find your way back." The two stood in silence for a moment. "Thank you," Mason said. Keanu smiled. "Just pass it on." The following weeks became a blur of rhythm, laughter, and rediscovery for Mason. Every Saturday morning, he showed up at East Side Music Center, no longer just a helper, but a regular part of the group. The kids started calling him Mr. M, even though he told them 100 times not to. They'd sneak him candy from their pockets, draw silly pictures of him with huge drumsticks, and beg him to stay longer. And Mason, he felt human again after months of feeling like a nobody. Here, he was seen. Not as the boy who messed up, not as the valet who got caught, but as someone who mattered. Still, he couldn't stop wondering why Keanu kept coming back too. Could be anywhere in the world, filming in Paris, giving interviews in Tokyo, standing on red carpets in LA. But no, here he was, week after week, tuning violins, carrying folding chairs, pouring water for kids during break. One Saturday, as Mason was helping a girl learn her drum rhythm, he looked across the room and saw Keanu sitting alone with one of the older boys. The boy, Elias, was about 15 and had been quiet since day one. Mason had never heard him speak, but now he was talking softly to Keanu, showing him a photo on his old phone. After the session ended, Mason found a moment and asked, "What were you guys talking about?" Keanu looked down, thoughtful. His dad left last year. Used to play piano. Elias wants to learn, but we don't have a working one. Mason glanced around the room. He hadn't noticed before. The keyboard in the corner was chipped, missing. "Half its keys. We could fix it, right?" he asked. Keanu shrugged. "Maybe, or replace it." Mason hesitated. "That costs money." Keanu smiled gently. "Everything costs something. Time, effort, money, pride. The question is, what's worth paying for?" That night, Mason went home and looked at the money he had saved in an old coffee can. $417, meant for a second-hand motorcycle he had been dreaming about for over a year." He stared at it for a long time. The next Saturday, Mason walked into the center carrying a second-hand but beautiful little keyboard in his arms. Everyone turned. Keanu raised an eyebrow. "That yours?" Mason shook his head. "No, his." He nodded toward Elias, who stood in the corner, wide-eyed. "I sold some stuff," Mason said simply. "Figured music meant more than metal." Elias stepped forward slowly. His hands shook as he touched the keys. Then he sat down and began to play, clumsy at first, then smoother. The notes danced in the dusty air, soft, unsure, but real. Everyone went quiet. Even the youngest kids sat still, watching him like it was magic. And maybe it was. Mason looked at Keanu, who didn't say a word, but his eyes glistened with something more powerful than any speech. Afterwards, Elias walked over, holding back tears. "Thank you," he said, barely a whisper. Mason smiled. "Just pass it on." Keanu clapped Mason on the back. "Told you, didn't I? It's what we do after the mistake that counts." But things weren't always smooth. One day, Mason came into the center and saw something that stopped him cold. Graffiti on the side wall. Spray paint in red letters. "Losers only. Charity is for the weak." Mason clenched his jaw. The kids stood around, reading it with sad eyes. Keanu arrived moments later and said nothing at first. He simply stared at the words. Then he turned to the group and said, "Paintbrushes." Everyone looked confused. "What?" Mason asked. Keanu smiled. "If someone wants to leave hate on our walls, we answer with art." Within an hour, the kids had buckets of paint. And over the angry message, they painted flowers, stars, guitars, hearts, drums, and faces. Mason painted a hand reaching out to help another. Keanu painted nothing. Instead, he stood back and watched the kids heal through color. When they were done, the wall didn't look damaged anymore. It looked alive. Later that day, Mason found Keanu sitting quietly in the back room. "Does it ever stop?" Mason asked. "What?" "The hate, the judgment." Keanu leaned forward. "No, but you grow strong enough to walk through it." Mason nodded slowly. "I never told you this," Keanu said after a moment. "But the first time I came here, I wasn't planning to stay. I thought maybe writing a check would be enough." "What changed?" Keanu looked him in the eyes. "You." Mason blinked. "Me? You reminded me that people don't need perfection. They need presence. That even when we fall short, we can show up." Mason's throat tightened. He had never imagined he could mean that much to someone like Keanu Reeves. But here he was, just a valet boy, who had insulted a stranger, and now he was becoming something else, something more. It started with a phone call, a single ring that shattered the peace Mason had been building for weeks. He had just left the music center after helping Elias organize old sheet music. The kids had gone home, and Keanu had promised to meet him later, for dinner at a quiet diner they both liked. Mason was whistling to himself, light on his feet, when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something told him to pick up. "Hello?" A voice on the other end was sharp and direct. "Mason Turner?" He paused. "Yeah." "Who's this?" "This is Detective Harper. We need to speak with you. Immediately." Mason's heart dropped. "What is this about?" he asked, voice dry. "It's about the Grand Elmont Hotel incident. Someone filed a delayed complaint. We need your statement." Mason stumbled backward until he leaned against a tree. "But that happened weeks ago, and Mr. Reeves never filed anything. He forgave me." "Someone else filed it," the detective said. "We'll discuss it at the station." The line went dead. Mason sat in the cold metal chair across from the detective in a small, silent room. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead. "A guest complained," Harper said. "They said they witnessed you verbally abusing a guest in front of children." and that you showed aggressive behavior toward a high-profile visitor, Mr. Reeves. Mason's head dropped into his hands. I already made it right. I've changed. Ask him. He's not the one accusing you, Harper replied. But we'll need to verify that. They let him go without charges. But they said the hotel was reviewing his employment, and that was enough to break him again. The next morning, Mason showed up at the hotel early, heart pounding. The manager wouldn't meet his eyes. Mason, she said quietly, someone sent the hotel board a copy of the video. The moment you insulted Keanu Reeves, it's been shared. Mason's face turned pale. What video? Security footage. Someone leaked it. I don't know who, but they're talking about letting you go. Mason staggered back, speechless. Everything he had rebuilt, his pride, his peace, his purpose, it all felt like it was slipping away. He left the hotel in silence. He didn't go to the music center that day. He didn't text Keanu. He sat on a bench in the park, staring at a family playing frisbee on the grass. And for the first time in weeks, he felt like he was back at the bottom. Hours later, he heard a voice. So this is where you disappear to when you're hurt. Mason looked up. Keanu stood there with 2 coffees in hand. How did you find me? Mason asked quietly. Keanu handed him one of the cups. When people are lost, they usually go where the world feels quiet. Mason took the coffee. I messed up again, not by what I did, but by what I used to be. Keanu sat beside him. You can't change the past, only how you carry it. They might fire me. Let them, Keanu said simply. Mason turned to him, shocked. What? If a job ends because of an old mistake, then maybe that job wasn't meant for who you've become. Mason's hands trembled. But what about my rent, my food? Keanu looked at him for a long time. Come work for me. What? At the music center, Keanu said softly. I was going to ask you next week, but maybe now is the right time. Mason stared. Are you serious? I've seen how the kids look at you, how you show up, how you've changed. We don't need a resume. We need your heart. Mason's eyes filled with tears. After all this, he was being given not just a second chance, but a new path. 2 days later, Mason's manager confirmed it. He was officially let go from the hotel. But this time, Mason didn't feel destroyed. He walked out of the building with his head high, turned his uniform in, and never looked back. That same afternoon, he stepped into the music center and was welcomed with open arms. Elias hugged him first. A girl named Ivy had drawn him a picture that said, "We love Mr. M." And on the whiteboard at the front of the room, someone had written in big, colorful letters, "Welcome to your new job." That evening, Keanu brought Mason to a rooftop nearby. They watched the sunset in silence. You still scared, Keanu? Asked. Mason nodded. A little, but also, I feel free. Keanu smiled. Good. Fear is normal. It means you care. Mason looked out at the city below. Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if someone hadn't believed in you? Keanu was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I don't wonder. I remember. Mason turned to him. When I was younger, Keanu said slowly, someone gave me a role when no one else would. They didn't judge my past, just saw my potential. Who was it? Keanu chuckled. An old theater teacher. She told me, you're more than your silence, Keanu. Your quiet is not emptiness, it's depth. Mason nodded. And now, Keanu added, you've become that person for someone else. Mason looked up. Who? Keanu pointed toward the horizon. You'll see. The music center was alive with color and sound. Paintings covered the once empty walls. Tiny fingers danced across keyboards and drums. A soft violin tune filled the air as Ivy tried her first solo. Mason stood in the middle of it all, clipboard in hand, guiding the afternoon session like he had done this for years. It had only been a week since Keanu gave him the job, but it already felt like home. He still thought about the hotel sometimes and how fast things had changed. But the pain didn't sting as much anymore. He had been broken, then rebuilt. Not alone, but with people who truly saw him, and he had begun to understand something Keanu once told him. Real strength isn't in staying perfect. It's in showing up even after you fall. But that belief would soon be tested, harder than ever before. The door opened slowly that afternoon. Mason didn't notice at first. Then he heard Ivy's voice, surprised. Hello? He turned and saw a man step inside. The uniform said everything. Red blazer, gold buttons, a name tag, and a look that Mason would never forget. "Hey," the man said, unsure. "Are you Mason?" Mason froze. It was Derek, one of the senior valet managers from the hotel. He hadn't seen him since the day he was fired. Memories flashed fast, being shouted at for small mistakes, mocked for his broken shoes, ignored when he asked for help. This was the same man who once told him, "You'll never go anywhere in life with that lazy attitude." Mason's heart pounded. "What are you doing here?" he asked, voice tight. Derek took a nervous step forward. I didn't know where else to go." Mason didn't answer. The kids had gone quiet, sensing something heavy in the air. "I got fired," Derek said. "Last week." Mason blinked. "Why?" "They found out I was the one who leaked the footage of you and Keanu," Derek admitted, eyes low. "I thought if I exposed you, maybe they'd promote me. But it backfired." Mason's jaw clenched. Derek continued. "I saw the article yesterday about this place, about what you and Keanu are doing here, and I guess I wanted to see it for myself." Keanu walked in just then, carrying a box of new guitar strings. He stopped when he saw Derek. "Everything okay?" he asked. Mason took a breath. "Yeah," he said. "This is Derek. He used to work with me at the hotel." Keanu nodded politely. "Welcome." Derek seemed unsure whether to speak or walk out, but Keanu turned to Mason. "Your call," he said softly. The room felt still. Mason looked at Derek, then at the kids, then down at his own hands. He remembered how broken he had been, how lost, and how one small act of kindness had changed everything. "Do you play anything?" Mason asked. Derek looked up, confused. "What?" "An instrument," Mason repeated. "Do you play anything?" Derek hesitated. "I used to mess around on the drums, back in high school. Nothing serious." Mason gave a half smile. "We've got a kid who needs a drum coach." Derek blinked. "Are you serious?" Mason nodded. "Only if you show up for real, no ego, just heart." Derek's eyes filled with something unfamiliar. Softness, regret, hope. He stepped forward slowly, and just like that, another broken man found a door that was still open. After the session, Keanu pulled Mason aside. "That was big," he said, quietly. "He didn't deserve kindness," Mason replied. "None of us do," Keanu said. "That's what makes it powerful." Mason looked at him. "You really believe people can change?" Keanu smiled. "Only because I did." They walked together down the sidewalk outside the center. "You know," Mason said, "you've changed my life completely." Keanu looked out at the sky. "And you've reminded me why I started all this." Mason looked at him, puzzled. "Movies give people stories," Keanu said. "But this place, it gives them a future." They stood in silence as the sun sank lower. The next day, a surprise visitor arrived at the music center, a woman, mid-50s. Soft brown eyes, sweater sleeves pushed up, and a bag full of papers. "Hi," she said. "Is Mason here?" Mason stepped forward. "That's me," she smiled. "I'm Ms. Benning. I'm from the City Arts Board. I read about your work here. We're offering a grant for programs that empower at-risk youth through the arts. Mason's eyebrows rose. Your name came up, she added. We'd love for you to apply. You have 1 week. Mason blinked. I don't even know how to write a grant. Keanu walked up behind him. We'll figure it out. Ms. Benning handed them the packet and left. Keanu looked at Mason with a grin. You, ready to build something bigger? Mason swallowed the lump in his throat. Let's do it. The week flew by faster than Mason expected. Between teaching music classes, helping Derek find his rhythm with the drums, and staying up late filling out the city grant forms with Keanu, Mason barely had time to sleep. But he didn't complain. For the first time in his life, he was building something that truly mattered. The music center had changed, and so had he. The walls were now filled with drawings and photos of the children who walked through them. Mason had taped up a picture of his first day there, awkward, lost, standing next to Keanu, beside a new one taken last week, smiling, surrounded by kids who called him Mr. M and looked up to him like he was a hero. But that Friday, everything changed. It was early morning when Mason arrived at the center. The front door was already unlocked. He blinked. That's weird, he whispered. Usually, Keanu opened up later. Inside, the place was quiet. Too quiet. The light in the back room was on. Mason stepped inside, and there, lying gently on the old sofa with a blanket over him and a notebook resting on his chest, was Keanu. His eyes were closed. Mason called out softly, Keanu. No answer. He rushed over, touched his shoulder. Cool. Still. And then the world slowed down. The doctors later said it was a sudden cardiac arrest. Quiet. Peaceful. His heart had stopped sometime during the night. Mason sat in the waiting room, the white walls blurring around him. Kids arrived with their parents, confused, crying. Derek sat silently beside Mason, hands shaking. Ivy clutched her mother's hand and whispered, but he promised we'd have music class today. No one had words. No one knew how to explain that the man who had brought them all together was now gone. The memorial was held in the music center itself, not in some grand Hollywood hall. No cameras, no red carpet, no press, just candles, drawings, and stories. Ivy played a small tune on her violin. Elias played a slow, haunting melody on the keyboard Mason had once bought him. Derek stood behind the drums, silent, then tapped out a soft heartbeat. Rhythm. Mason stood last, hands trembling, eyes full. He didn't just teach us music, Mason said. He taught us how to forgive, how to rise, how to stay soft in a world that tries to make you hard. He paused. I met him because I insulted him, because I was angry and lost. And instead of walking away, he saw something in me I couldn't see myself. The kids listened, quiet, some of them wiping their eyes. He never shouted, never tried to impress anyone. He just showed up. Mason lifted the notebook Keanu had been holding when he passed. Inside were pages of messy notes, lesson plans, grant ideas, kids' names and dreams scribbled in the margins, and one note on the last page. If I leave tomorrow, I'll be okay. Because Mason is ready. Weeks passed. The grant committee approved the proposal. Mason stood in front of the center with a check in his hand and tears in his eyes. The center was now officially a city-supported arts academy for underprivileged youth. They renamed it the Reeves Center for Music and Light. Mason became its full-time director. Derek stayed on as percussion coach, and every child who walked in the door was reminded of the man who started it all, not with speeches or spotlights, but with one quiet act of compassion. Months later, a little boy came through the doors on a rainy morning. He had no umbrella, worn shoes, and a rough edge in his voice. He looked at Mason and said, "You got anything for someone like me?" Mason smiled. "Yeah," he said, "we've got music." He led him inside, handed him a pair of old drumsticks, and said the same words that once changed his own life. Just show up. We'll figure out the rest together.